We are.
Don't say anything you don't want to follow you around for ages.
Probably best to reiterate that with me.
mm,
Yeah. No. Things are back to normal in MotoGP.
okay, we are actually live. Brilliant.
Brilliant.
Right, I'm going to try and... Oh, I'm going to have to mute that. That's There we go. Right. How do I... Now, apparently you can go back in and then... Oh, cool. Right.
I'm just tweeting out the link.
Yeah, yeah. Cheers.
Just from my account.
I honestly, I need to employ someone to do all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, it's a lot easier than being an octopus, isn't it?
Yeah, because you're just all over the place. It's just kind of like, oh, I got to do this, right, and then I got to do that, and then, goodness me.
Yeah, it reminds me that I need to work on my show too. So.
Is there something on with your show, Phil? Because I've not been getting the notifications of episodes in my Spotify, and then I'll get like 3 through at once.
Yeah, it's because that's me. No, that's me.
Oh, okay.
Because I've been buried with work, and so I'm like backlogged on shows. So then, like, we're current, but the fact is, I'm like a couple days behind. But I'm running around all day, and then usually like a couple, 2, 3 days a week, I've been out bowling in leagues. So then and practicing. So then on top of that, I'm barely ever home. But one of these days, I'll figure out a plan. A new job will give me more time during the afternoons and evenings. So. Thankfully.
It's also annoying because a lot of this stuff is pre-formatted, the actual description and stuff, but the moment you actually put it into YouTube, it just kind of goes. So that's all fun.
Yeah, YouTube, I think that was the thing that when I had to do it the one time I had to do it, it was where it was kind of wonky. It was the YouTube part.
Mm.
I was on that show, wasn't I?
Yeah, it was. It was.
So Steph had connection issues, wasn't it?
Yeah, Steph disappeared, and then it was just the two of you, and it was the full monkey seat pod and the grip strip pod representing.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the longest live streams I've ever done, as I recall.
The Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, I think
That's
it was.
right, yeah. It might have even been my first. I think it might have been my first one.
Yeah, that was... Wow, Eric Jones qualified in the top 10. Jeez. All the Hendrick cars basically together. Kyle Busch and Joey Logano. Interesting. Wow. Briscoe's only... What is it? 0.05 of a second ahead of Anthony Alfredo. That's crazy.
It's so hard to watch NASCAR in the UK that I always want to watch it and get my head around it.
No, you don't. It's terrible.
Yeah. To be honest, I find it hard to watch NASCAR even when it's on. It's just difficult to watch.
It's become worse over the years. It used to be a lot better when they presented it properly, but now it's a circus. So, I mean, if you have like proper presenters or something and they explain it the right way, like then it's one thing. It's the way with F1 now that we get the Sky broadcast. I mean, I like the broadcast that we had before with NBC and Speed and all that. But there's just a different level. You know, you get a lot more information, you get a lot more insight on the ground, and it seems like they're just very in tune to everything. And there's a lot of people too, you know, and they utilize everybody well.
My goodness, I think I'm actually doing it all. Hold on.
Oh, he does have a neck.
Right, there we go. Apologies for the delay there. Are we good to go?
Always.
Okay. There we go.
I'm glad Zoom tells us that now.
Yeah.
Makes me laugh every single time. I hate it. I get why, but like, you know. Mercedes course out and strategy, the French Grand Prix being interesting, and Max Verstappen going wide at turn 1. Did nobody tell the F1 paddock the script, or is the fight really this intense this year? Seemed kind of like opposite day. Welcome back to the Grid Talk podcast. Hosting today will be me, Owain Medford, and joining me are F1 writer and podcaster for the Grip Strip podcast, Philip Mathew.
Hello.
And co-host of the Monkey Seat podcast, Tom Horrox.
Hello.
Right, so it's kind of... It wasn't what we expected really today, was it? So it's not the sort of thing you expect to see from the French Grand Prix. It's just kind of, it was all sort of topsy-turvy and stuff. I didn't think it'd end up going that way.
Yeah, it was.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, definitely. It was. I mean, we've only had 2 previous ones to go by, and it was during a spell when Mercedes were in their most dominant spell. So it deserves a fair crack at the whip, and it definitely got it today.
Yeah, it was definitely something that I didn't expect, because we usually look at Ricciardo as being a bore fest, and it based on what it has been over the last 2 years, where Lewis led all but 1 lap of both of those. But this one definitely, from start to finish, had plenty of intrigue, and not just at the top end of the field between the championship battle, the combatants of Max and Lewis, but through the points, all the way through the points, and even outside the points.
Yeah, like you say, Phil, it was a really big battle actually from the front. We focused a lot of it, a lot of the race on the front, just strategically speaking. It's a 3rd win in a row for Red Bull, and I just want to go with you, Phil. But like, it's getting to the point where Mercedes really need to win the next race, because Red Bull are building up a huge momentum, and they're getting to the point where they've now stolen sort of 75 points at the top, and you know, Mercedes need to get some higher finishes, because otherwise it might start to run away from them a little bit.
Yeah, the constructors' battle is starting to be an issue for Mercedes. I mean, you could go through the last 3 races. We probably will in some detail based on what we're going to talk about with Lewis and Valtteri. But for Verstappen, for Red Bull, Honda, this whole combination to get 2 wins out of 3, they probably should have had 3 in a row on that side of the garage. But Red Bull itself having 3 consecutive victories in this era of Formula One. It's harkening back to the Seb Vettel 4 in a row days a decade ago or thereabouts. And Verstappen has picked his game up, and he wants this championship really bad. He wants to beat Lewis Hamilton and be the guy that says, I slayed one of the GOATs, and he has a chance to do it, really. Car is there. He is there. Strategy is on point. He has a teammate that's on board with him, and they're working in unison. And the car seems to work basically anywhere. At least on one lap pace, they definitely have it. And there's times where they may struggle in races, but frankly, when it has counted generally, at least for the last few races, it's been Max Verstappen and Red Bull.
Yeah, 100%. Totally agree with you there. Tom, just bearing in mind just bearing in mind some of the things Phil was saying there, it looks like it was kind of, it was almost as if you could just swap Mercedes for Verstappen there, and it's like Mercedes are out of sorts. They've switched places almost with Red Bull in a few races, and the Red Bull performance was sort of evocative of the most dominant days of Mercedes in charge. Do you think sort of Lewis Hamilton, it was kind of maybe a little bit lucky in some ways to come away with the second place?
I think I think Lewis's abilities is what got Mercedes second place in that race there, because I think if you look back to 2019 at the start of that season, Ferrari had the quickest car, and then Mercedes somehow managed to walk out with, I think, was it 6-1-2s or 6 out of 7 races or something ridiculous. That was all down to Mercedes' strategy team and Ferrari being Ferrari. But they, as you're right, they've seemed to have done a complete 180. They don't seem to have that clarity of vision anymore, that foresight. I mean, I think on our group chat I was saying before, they needed to stop this race like I did in Spain, and that in Spain they got it absolutely spot on. But in this race here, it was obvious what they needed to do. I mean, Bottas and Hamilton were both screaming for it, saying this is a 2-stop race. Let's make sure we're not the ones that are undercut. And what happens? Verstappen goes in. Given that he gave up track position for that, that was a bold move for Red Bull, and it almost didn't pay off. And I think the reason that it did pay off was purely down to Hamilton, because you saw what happened with Bottas. Bottas was looking racy at the start of the race. He locked up, had to make an early stop, which I think is then what's triggered this potential 2-stop race, because he made the early stop due to the had to make an early undercut attempt on Verstappen because he had a flat spot. He was only going to fall away, so he needed something aggressive to get him back into the race. As a result of that, obviously Verstappen then makes an early stop, and then Hamilton has to respond. That loses them the lead. So Bottas locking up has effectively lost Hamilton the lead there after a complete gift of Max Verstappen giving Hamilton the lead. He would have just driven away from it like he looked like he was going to do at the start of the second stint. But then to not then identify that this is clearly going to be a 2-stop race. We've had to make the early stop, so let's be on the aggressive side here. And Verstappen's just completely. He's just Red Bull, and then we just completely out-strategized Mercedes, and Mercedes have ended up in a position where they have to stay out, because if they pit, all they're going to do is come out 4 or 5 seconds behind Verstappen, and they're not going to be able to fight from there. At least with this strategy, we got to the penultimate lap and he was still in the fight. There could have been a safety car, there could have been all kinds of things that went on, but as it was, they didn't, and Verstappen was able to take a deserved win. And yeah, you've got to say that Mercedes have contributed to Red Bull winning this race, which is just not what we're used to from this outfit. There's definitely something that's changed, and it's and they need to get back to where they were, because their pit stops and their strategies are going to cost them the championship, certainly the Constructors' Championship, and it's just Lewis that's keeping them in the drivers right now.
Yeah, it does seem a little ironic that the flat spot from Valtteri causing that early pit stop, and then having to push so hard to almost try and make the best of a bad situation and jump Verstappen if they could, as almost forced Lewis Hamilton into taking that second place. You say it was obviously high degradation, and it absolutely was. I don't think the teams were expecting it at all. It maybe seems like rain shower, or the quite a fairly heavy rain that they had before the race. Obviously, we didn't see it during the race, which is yet again a bit of a if they predict rain, it won't show up. The one person who didn't seem to be having those problems whatsoever, and he almost never does, is Sergio Perez. Philip, he's got sort of 7 races in, as he said in many sort of in a number of interviews now, and he's really getting on top of this car, and he's being exactly what Red Bull need him to be at this point, and it's really causing Mercedes some issues there.
Well, Checo was going to figure it out. He's become one of the most solid drivers for many years. People want to slag him for what he did at McLaren. The fact of the matter is they weren't the team that they were before that. He was aggressive. He's still aggressive, but he's learned how to manage tires and their strategy call, like Tom was saying, like we've been discussing. The reality is Red Bull played Mercedes like a fiddle in that, Checo's falling back. He's not keeping up. Well, he gave himself clean air. He saved his tires, was able to go long, give himself clean air again to go and once everybody else pitted, and gave himself fresher tires to then go and fight back against Mercedes to go and back up Max if he wanted, whichever way he wanted to go. I think, honestly, if Max had decided to stay out on a one-stop strategy, I don't see where Lewis was really going to be able to pass him because he could get up there. The DRS wasn't enough because they had lower drag on the Red Bull. So that was one thing. I think the pace was there once he got back out in front of Lewis relative to when he was behind him, because Lewis was able to build a gap of about 2 seconds. But, there's whatever in that. But for Checo, it's credit to him, Baku getting the win after what was going to be a second place finish, coming back with another podium finish. The Red Bull, this is the most harmony and best situation they have in their team ever since they've been a relevant Formula One team. They never really had great, harmony between Vettel and Webber. The Vettel was out the door and Ricciardo was still there. Then they had whatever was going on before they brought Max. Then they put everything on Max and decided to tell Ricciardo to go. Now they actually have a team. They have a good car, and they're working in unison. And that's why they're taking points off Mercedes. That's why Checo is going to keep on contending, and he's going to be a solid third in the World Championship this year. And if Mercedes keeps stepping on their own stuff, then it could become worse. It could be better for him, actually.
Red Bull just seems to have it hooked up, and they've actually worked out the scenario and got this sort of inter-driver politics right for once. The person who is sort of normally on the end of bad inter-driver politics, particularly when it comes to sort of, managing tyres or getting a second pit stop when you're screaming at the team for one, is Valtteri Bottas. Tom, it just seemed like you heard his outburst after the race, or sorry, during the race even. He really wasn't happy with the way that they just kind of left him out there when, he could see the writing on the wall way before they could, apparently.
Well, yeah, I mean, he was definitely angry about not getting the two-stop strategy that they wanted. But as I said before, once Verstappen had boxed, it's too late. There's no point going for it then. And he completely ballsed up his chance when he flat spotted the tyres there, and that meant that the two-stop was the only way to go, and Mercedes should have identified that, but they didn't identify that. They thought the one-stop was the way to go. They thought they could make it last, but as I said, once Verstappen's in, you've just got to make the best of it. And to us, he put up such a pitiful defense attack from Max Verstappen. He's potentially he's forced Red Bull's hand, potentially costing Lewis Hamilton the victory there with his lockup. And then another situation, they're not doing the job for the team. Verstappen's always going to get past him. It wouldn't surprise me if he just didn't put up a strong defence because he didn't want the extra points for Hamilton there. And then also, I didn't hear anything, but I'm pretty sure Mercedes were getting ready for a pit stop for Bottas. The obvious thing to do would be, as soon as Perez was through, bring him in, stick him on a set of softs, go for the fastest lap. He had 60 odd seconds or 55 seconds back to Norris. There was absolutely no reason not to do that, and it wouldn't surprise me if he's come on the radio and he said, "No, I'm not doing it. I'll see this through to the end," because again, that's a point away from Verstappen. I base that purely on nothing. I've heard no radio message to suggest that. This is purely my opinion, but I just get the impression that Bottas is starting to bite back. He's on these radio messages. He's starting to get a little bit of steel behind them, and he's been quite critical in the press as well of Mercedes. I think he knows that he's going. Or he's certainly got the impression that he's going, and he's not playing the team game anymore. You've only got to look at the time he held Hamilton up. Was it in Spain? He's not playing the job that Bottas is employed to do. He's been there since 2017. 2017 was the closest he's ever been to Hamilton. He's not going to match him over the course of a season. And the only thing that's kept him in that role is that he's a great number two, and he's not being a great number two at the moment. So for that reason, I can't see him staying in that team for next season. And with Ocon now signing on for Alpine, that's kind of like put the final nail in the Russell coffin to get him in that car, as far as I'm concerned. But he was not the blocker that Hamilton needed him to be today, and that's not going to impress Mercedes at all.
Yeah, I think you're right, actually. Specifically when it comes to him being out of the car next season. It's starting to become a bit of a sort of, the clues are stacking up, and it's maybe becoming an orgy of evidence of what's going to happen. If only if only Eddie was here Eddie Jordan to write the bombshell piece. But I think we can all see it coming, so it doesn't really matter. He doesn't need to. Next is another two. I'll do them both kind of because they had a really great race both together. Lando Norris and Daniel Ricciardo, Philip. Great race for them, and it really just make you wonder how high they could have got. Whether they could have actually done anything up the front with their amazing sort of straight line speed that they seem to have, or at least Norris did it from what I saw. 5th and 6th for the McLarens. That's a huge result.
Yeah, they're in terms of being able to respond. I think for in terms of McLaren, the tire pressure changes they brought out where you had to run a fixed tire pressure, the flexi wing deal didn't really affect Red Bull, obviously, but I think for Ferrari's sake, it definitely affected, both those things affected them a lot based on what happened to them today. And one of the people and teams that benefited most was McLaren. Ricciardo looked the best he's looked all year. Lando was left out very late for a long time, but was able to come all the way back up and get a top 5 finish. I mean, they solidified themselves right now. They have a 16-point lead for third in constructors, so they're in a good place going to Austria, where Lando got a podium last year in one of the races. So I mean, it's a good time for McLaren. They're making that progress. I know Tom's happy as a McLaren guy. Probably should have given him this one, but the fact of the matter is Daniel Ricciardo running well is a positive in general for all people, because he's just a cool dude. And for Lando Norris, he's able to kind of respond to Sergio Perez in terms of their sort of mini battle for third in the Drivers' Championship, keeping it within 8 points. So it's a positive weekend for McLaren. Maybe could have gotten a little more out of qualifying, but they definitely got the most out of the race given the circumstances. And I think it's only full speed and upward trajectory for them as they go forward through this next part of the season, and with multiple races coming up at both Austria and then also the sprint deal at the British Grand Prix.
Yeah, that's an excellent point you make. Actually, I didn't realise that Lando Norris was in 4th place. He's actually significant. He's a decent amount of points ahead of Valtteri Bottas, which I think says everything we need to know. Yeah, it's a great sort of relationship between those two at McLaren. Just behind them was then Pierre Gasly, Tom. He lost one place, but bearing in mind sort of the speed of the McLarens going past him, I'm not surprised by that in some ways. It was a fairly good weekend for him, compared to his teammate at least.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he started sixth and finished seventh, so he's going to be disappointed in that, given that he's allowed both McLarens through as well. But I think he was a little bit hung out to dry on the strategy. I mean, McLaren's had the luxury of having their two guys running one behind the other. So the strategy was undercut Gasly to get Ricciardo ahead of him, then Lando to go long, and then have softer, better tyres at the end, which worked wonders coming through the field, coming out 13th or something, and then coming through. Worked really well for Lando. Ricciardo, I think, will be slightly disappointed, but Gasly, he's made a couple of great passes on the Ferraris, but then equal, as I said, got done by the McLarens. He was showing good pace towards the end of the race. He's clearly the number one in that team. He's way ahead of his junior teammate. Obviously, he's finished ahead of the Alpines, which is what he needs to do. Finish ahead of the Ferraris. He's going to be disappointed to be behind the McLarens, but AlphaTauri aren't really going to catch the McLarens, I don't think. They're too far up the road. So for the team, he's done the job today. Probably not maximised the result, as I'd say. Probably, Lando probably had too much pace for him in the end, but he could have beaten Ricciardo, and Ricciardo was ahead of Norris on track. So I think fifth place would have been like the ultimate. He could have finished in that race. So seventh is not horrendous at all. I just think he's probably just, the team left him with a bit on the table today. They probably could have done slightly better with the strategy, but he's maximised what he was given on track. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens with him come the end of the season, because I think he's going to have to stay in AlphaTauri. I mean, I know he likes the team there. He's not going to get the call up to Red Bull. We know that. There's nowhere else he can go that's competitive, unless he's in the frame for that Mercedes seat is the only other possibility, which I think we discussed on yesterday's podcast actually. But that's the only real possibility from the end of the season. But I can't see that coming to fruition anytime soon. So he's kind of stuck in this midfield, not quite top team, too good for a bottom team place, and he's just not quite in the elite level yet, which is. He needs a couple more box office results to kind of put himself in that fight. But I think next year he's just going to have to stick with what he's got and just hope that AlphaTauri pulls something incredible out next year. Which, given that they're the sister team to Red Bull, I can't see them fighting for a championship. But he's going to have to hope that Red Bull nail it next year and that they've got the best two cars, because that's the only real way he's going to move forward next year. Yeah,
it's a good point. He's kind of resigned to the. After everything that's happened, he's kind of resigned to the junior team. Next is Fernando Alonso, who, apart from being sort of really just kind of done by the McLarens, he had it was an anonymous performance, but not in a bad way. Just kind of, he's gone up a spot, but apart from that, he's not trailing around the back, which is kind of a good thing, I guess. Phil.
Yeah, for Fred to actually represent the team at their home Grand Prix, actually finish on the lead lap, finishing the points ahead of the guy who just got a 3-year deal, which was surprising to me, honestly. But, kind of doing into what Tom was saying in regards to Gasly's mobility to possibly go somewhere else. For Alonso to get a top 10 finish, be able to stay ahead of the Aston Martins was a solid race. Of course, they're not going to have the top line pace. They don't have that. They have it's between them and Ferrari for who has the weakest engine. Probably it is the Renault at this point. They also don't have as good of a car as they had last year. So they have their moments where they'll be up there on the back end of the top 5. Of course, what was it? I think it was last race at Baku, or it was at Monaco, wherever he made up a bunch of spots, or I think it was Baku. He made up a bunch of spots on that final restart, and it showed that Fernando Alonso still is Fernando Alonso. He can pull stuff out of the hat, but we'll see what happens. It's more about 2020. He always says it's about 2022, taking mini points in regards to their battle. He's still outside of the top 10 in points right now. He's 5 points out of his own teammate, but he's 13 points out of the top 10. And they're 7th in the constructors, and they're 11 points behind Aston Martin. So it's going to be a struggle for them. So whenever any points they can get any points, it's a positive.
Yeah, it definitely is. It's a shame that they didn't get a double score, but Fernando's really sort of actually managed to get himself going after a few races, which is, after a year out, that's actually fairly impressive. Next, we then have Sebastian Vettel and Lance Stroll. They seem to sort of quite fairly regularly get into the 9th and 10th places, but that sort of doesn't tell the story if you just look at the race result, does it, Tom?
No, I mean Stroll starting at the back and Vettel starting 12th. It's a reasonable return. They were both on the same strategy. I think Vettel went slightly longer than Stroll, but Stroll finished 11, 12 seconds off behind his teammate, 9th and 10th. That's kind of the best that Stroll could have really hoped for was a bottom end points finish. The starting on the hard tyres and running along worked really well for them in Baku. Didn't work quite so well for Vettel today, but with where Lance Stroll was, it's kind of the only thing they could have done. They were the only two people that started on the hard tyres that really made it pay. Everyone else who started on the hard tyres actually ended up losing positions or staying exactly the same if you're Kimi Raikkonen, but then that's him. So it's kind of the best they could hope for, really. I mean, Vettel impressed me with lap 2 overtake on Ocon, and then he was running as high as 5th at one point, which was obviously just running long. Stroll was running 6th as well. Again, stopping on lap 38 to come out in 11th, and then as soon as the Ferraris fell away, he just picked off those places. So best they could really do, finishing behind Alonso and Gasly, pretty good considering where he started. That's kind of the best they could do. They didn't have the pace this weekend. They looked pretty bad all through practice, all through qualifying. I think 12th place probably flattered Vettel, to be honest, and Lance Stroll qualifying 19th. We kind of, he missed out on qualifying from the red flag, but at no point did he look like he was going to be out of Q1 anyway, because he's just very scruffy, just very untidy, just couldn't put a lap together. So definitely a better performance from him on the Sunday to get a double points finish. 3 points at the end of a bad weekend. Not bad at all. Obviously, that kind of keeps them in check with Alpine. They lose a bit of ground to AlphaTauri. They need to put this behind them and move on and try and get better. Because although a double points finish is great on paper, they've still not scored as many points as AlphaTauri. They've not gained on Alpine, so the only good thing is they've obviously beaten by Ferraris, so that's good for them in that fight, but I don't really see them in that fight at the end of the season. So they need to be beating the teams that they should be beating and pushing forward a bit and hopefully getting a few more close to podium results come the end of the season for one driver at least anyway, who has clearly now got to grips with that car, got to grips with that team, and is performing well, just as we all knew he would eventually.
Yeah, it's excellent. Another driver is sort of switched teams and must have felt awful, really, going down the Mistral Straight and just being blown by a McLaren that maybe he should have been sitting in. Is Carlos Sainz. We've been saying for a while that the Ferrari can qualify, but it can't race. It's kind of the best they could hope for, I think, with 11th, Phil, for Carlos Sainz.
Yeah, it was a nightmare scenario for both Sainz and Leclerc. Owain. It was, as I mentioned earlier, I think those changes, the rules, directives that they put out have affected Ferrari worse than any other team. They didn't have the amazing race pace anyway, of course, as you said, but Sainz is always somebody who's scrappy and is able to make the most of a situation and get the most out of a car. For him to go and basically just be an anchor, not even get points after being in contention for the last few races is a bad sign. Going to Austria, which is a very fast circuit, very short track. It's basically...
Oh, sorry. Sorry about that.
The rear is a very bad scenario going to the circuits that they're going to be going to here. Between the Austria, and then you have the Silverstone, Spa. It's not laying out very good for Ferrari if this is the trend. And for Carlos Sainz, he's up there in the points. He was I think he was around the top 5 area, and now he's 10 points behind. He's still 10 points behind his teammate Charles Leclerc, but now they're giving up points to Gasly, Ricciardo, Vettel, the like. So that's going to be something we have to watch as we go along here in the next few weeks.
Yeah, it's really hotting up in that sort of in the space they occupy. In this constructors battle, we were sort of thinking in the last few races, it was really bad because obviously Haas were getting, some of the Haas drivers. Obviously, we love Mick, but some of the Haas drivers were getting to the point where they're actually pushing up and getting results that would, leave Williams down in the last spot. But George Russell, a 13th place would have got them out of that spot as a team, and he goes one better and puts in a 12th place. Bearing in mind the speed of the Williams, Tom, that's relatively it's kind of incredible.
Yeah, and it's also a windy track. I didn't expect Williams to be anywhere, and this is one thing. It's great that we're having lots of action at the front, and I'm not in any way disparaging the fact that we've got action at the front. It's great to have that for a change, but I really wanted to see more of that battle at the back there. I mean, rather than just seeing the Mercedes and the Red Bull running line astern for 20 laps at a time, one putting pressure on the other, at least have a picture-in-picture in the bottom left-hand corner of George Russell. I want to know more about what happened in this race, because aside from watching, disappearing into the matrix and watching the timings, and not actually watching what's going on screen, there's not a lot you can learn about his race. He's but in the opening laps, he started up in 14th place, but he was right at the back again early on behind his teammate, and we don't know what happened there. Then he's back ahead of him, but again we didn't see how that happened, and then he's gradually picked up the positions, finished ahead of Carlos Sainz. Just behind Carlos Sainz, finished ahead of Charles Leclerc, finished ahead of an Alpine, both Alfa Romeos. I want to know how that came about, because he didn't have a miracle strategy. He didn't have a lucky safety car. He's beaten Yuki Tsunoda, who was ahead of him after had a good start, but I want to know how that happened, and we can't see that, and that's what's frustrating. I know Mercedes will probably be going all through the data and seeing exactly what happened, and they'll know, because they're the ones that are going to be interested in his future. But why can't the direction pick that up a bit more? Because we can't sit there for 3 hours afterwards on the Sky coverage hoping that they might just have a quick chat with George Russell and talk through his race. But it's just frustrating that we just didn't see any of that, because it's a solid result. It's put Williams back ahead in the Constructors' Championship, which I know Williams have said that they have no targets for this season, but politically they've got to be looking at beating Haas. They have to be. Really, they should be looking at Alfa Romeo and trying to close in on them. It's only 2 points. It's one good finish, and then they could find themselves overhauling them, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen. But you just don't know. If we end up going to Nürburgring or something like that instead, we have a rainy day and George Russell might suddenly sneak a 6th place out of nowhere. It's possible. There's normally at least one crazy race in the season. So, hopefully that'll happen for George this year. But it's great that he's got that 12th place, and I'm really happy for him. But just so frustrated that we didn't see any of it, because it was all on merit. He had the same strategy as all the people at the front, and he's got there because that's how fast he's driven, which is impressive. But who knows what actually happened?
Yeah, it's sort of the curse of having two, competitive battles all the way through. Is there's only sort of one camera you can show at a time. You mentioned Yuki Tsunoda. I'm sorry about this sort of jerkiness of the transition there. It's not exactly the smoothest thing in the world. But Yuki Tsunoda actually did surprisingly well after an unfortunate sort of crash in qualifying, and probably ruined the gearbox by the looks of things on the replay. He started from the pit lane, and he's made a decent enough start, but he's made it to 13th place, which is actually fairly surprising and much better than what he's been doing recently. Maybe he should just start from the pit lane every single race, Phil.
Yeah, well, he finished, so that's already a bonus. The fact that he had the issue in qualifying, notwithstanding, for Yuki to get laps, get seat time, it matters for him. The rookie battle is basically 3-tiered. Yuki's in his own little world. You have Mick, who has an inter-team battle with Egghead. But, there's 3 tiers at this point. And the fact that Yuki Tsunoda is just like giving away laps and time when you have no testing really, you need to be out there. Your teammates up there making points when he gets a chance with Gasly. Of course, he has a lot more experience, granted, and it's his team basically. But Sonoda has a potential. He has a skill. He needs to keep building himself up as we get into the second half of the season, and he needs to keep taking steps forward, getting finishes, and then moving those finishes up into the points as we get towards the summer break, so that once they come back from that break, he's able to pounce when they go to Belgium, go to the Dutch Grand Prix and go to the Italian Grand Prix, where there might be circuits that might suit the AlphaTauri maybe a little better and might suit Yuki Tsunoda's driving style a little better too. But for him to get a finish, it's a positive. For him to make some good moves on the start, coming from pit lane, is a positive. It's just unfortunate he didn't give himself a chance, after qualifying, what happened in qualifying. But it looks like both of the guys from the back row actually had a pretty decent day, so that doesn't usually happen in Formula One.
Yeah, it's normally who had to overtake, but on some days it just happens, particularly at a place like France. After that, looking to bounce back from his unfortunate DNF was Esteban Ocon, and he's done a fairly good job, but it's not the most amazing thing in the world, bearing in mind where he started, Tom.
No, I think he's going to be very disappointed in that. I mean, he started 11th, and his teammates started 9th. In the end, his teammates finished 8th, and he's finished 14th. It's not great, especially when you got the Ferraris that just seem to have no pace at all and just dropped out of there, and he still ended up losing positions. He lost out to Vettel on lap 2, and it looked like I was looking at the hard runners thinking these guys, we're going to have to watch them later in the race, and only the Aston Martins, as I alluded to earlier, they're the only ones that actually managed to make the starting on the hard tyre strategy actually pay. He just fell out of the points and he was nowhere. At no point did we see him doing anything. There's a point where I was thinking, oh, that's Ocon making a... No, it's Alonso again. And this is like kind of, for me, I'm going to see this as the race where Alonso returned to Formula One, because, he beat Ocon in the last race, but that was obviously due to Ocon's retirement. Ocon's looked the stronger all season, but I think Fernando's starting to get there, and he's been soundly beaten by Alonso this weekend, which after getting this new contract, I mean, he's not going to be under pressure of losing his drive, which is great, but he doesn't want to be beaten by 39, 40-year-old Fernando Alonso week in, week out, because that's not going to do his potential any help for the future. Because if he gets soundly beaten by Alonso over this season and next season, then when it comes to contract negotiations time, they're going to be looking for someone to come in, a box office driver to come in, instead of promoting from within. He needs to be that driver that's at least a match for Alonso, so that when they're looking at new drivers to come in, they're looking at young drivers from the academy to partner him, so that he can then push on as a number one driver with a youngster coming through. If he carries on doing what he's doing, then come the end of the 3-year contract, they're going to be looking to get him out, get a box office star in, so they can do the similar thing with their young drivers, or just replace him altogether with young drivers. So he's and it's one race, and it's the first race since he's signed his new contract. So it's probably a bit sensationalist to say he needs to be looking out in 2.5 years' time based on one race. But still, it's just something to think about for the long term, because he's just not had a great race today. He's showed no pace at any point in the race, and it's a bit mystifying to see why, to be honest. So, his teammate just completely outshone him today. So yeah, he's not going to be happy at all. So he needs to improve for the next race.
Yeah, sort of a performance evocative of some of the issues that Jenson Button had in sort of 2011. It's not 2011, sorry, 2012, 2013, that sort of issues. After that, we have Giovinazzi. Bearing in mind that the finishes that the Alfa Romeos have been achieving, it seems this sort of change of track away from a street circuit has really impacted them more than most, with Giovinazzi being 15th and Raikkonen being 17th. That's a far cry from the 10th and 11th that we've been seeing them get a lot over the last couple of races, Phil.
Well, I guess they'll be holding on till Hungary, because that's the next time they'll be able to drive on a go-kart type circuit, which seems to fit the Alpha slobber. But otherwise, they're basically where they are, which is right ahead of the Williams and the Putin Haas's. And frankly, it's a shame to see. I mean, Giovinazzi has taken steps forward this year, but they can't. Sometimes it's just the car isn't capable on certain circuits. It's a long circuit, low downforce. You're with twisty, tight turns, but also a lot of mid to high speed corners, and that does not suit the Alpha well. And unfortunately for them this weekend, for Giovinazzi and for Kimi, they were both in the way, or at least Kimi was in the way of Lewis during that whole battle with Max. So we'll see what happens with them, but it's going to kind of be a problem. Maybe they could do something at Red Bull Ring over these next couple of races, but I have a hard time believing that because it's similar kind of characteristics minus the fact that it'll be a much more condensed track, which is basically the short track of Formula One at Red Bull Ring.
Yeah, exactly. It's two circuits and 3 races that aren't going to look so great for Alfa Romeo, to think. Just obviously being the way that Silverstone and the I was about to call it the A1 ring, then the Red Bull ring are, fast and flowing, and bearing in mind how full Ricciardo is, that may not suit the Alphas. So yeah, it could be a rough couple of weeks ahead of them before they sort of get to happier hunting grounds. Today it was just moving on to the next driver. It's not a name you expect to see so far down, but it's Charles Leclerc, and he's just, I don't know whether he's had a massive issue that we've not been told about or something, but he's in 16th place, Tom, and that's just it's baffling more than anything else.
Yeah, is he back? Is he back in the Sauber from 3 years ago? That's yeah. It's odd. I mean, he qualified. He was very. He obviously had a bad qualifying session when you look at his teammate. His teammate's been doing a much better job all weekend. Qualifying 7th, though, was still... If you said to me Leclerc qualified 7th before the start of the weekend, I'd have thought, yep, Sainz will be about 9th. That's about right for Ferrari. But as it was, 7th was the worst Ferrari performance. So I thought, okay, they're a lot better than I thought they were going to be at this track. He maintained a good position at the start, but then he got passed by Ricciardo. But then he was first to box. And then the undercut, we all saw how extremely powerful it was. And he was up to 5th and looking really strong. He was ahead of his teammate on track and all was looking good. But then he just had no pace. He had to make a second stop on lap 39 and just never really featured after that. Fresh tyres, you expect to see him then coming back through the field and fighting for points at the end. But given that he made a second stop, he's been lapped. He's way behind Carlos Sainz, who was way up the road, although not doing particularly well. He was 20 odd seconds up the road from his teammate. So that second stop from Leclerc has gained him nothing because Carlos Sainz pretty much had a pit stop in hand at the end of the race. So shocking. I don't know, like you say, I don't think he's had any major issues. I just think he had issues with the tyres. And he just didn't feature. Once he made that second stop, we never saw him again. And to not even get ahead of Giovinazzi, that's a shocker. The guy who started in the pit lane has finished ahead of the guy who started 7th on the grid, and that's a Ferrari, which is a better car than the AlphaTauri. So I don't know what's happened there, but it's not good for Ferrari. I'm not complaining, but given that I'm a huge McLaren fan, but I may have mentioned that at some point. But it's still I'm very surprised at that. Very, very surprised. 0 points for Ferrari this weekend. Not going to be happy at all.
Yeah, it's kind of awful. There's not much. It's more like 2014 Ferrari somehow. 2014 or maybe 2013, I guess, as well. Those 2 years were not great for them, and it's weird that that sort of thing's coming back up. After that, we've got Kimi Raikkonen, who is there. He's in 17th place. Phil, I don't think there's much more. He's started where he's finished, which is very Kimi, but he's in a not particularly fast Alfa Romeo, is he?
No, and he's just kind of running out the string at this point because we don't really know where the Sauber team is going to be. They're going to lose that Alfa Romeo support, supposedly, I think. But if not, I mean, they're going to run Callum a lot, and Robert Kubica here in the next couple of weeks. So that is one thing. You figure Mick Schumacher, as you mentioned earlier, might be going there. That might be one angle. There's also the angle that, FIA may say to Renault, you need to have another team and or give them power units. So then they would be the team that would get those power units, and that would bring someone like a Guan Yu Zhou or one of the Renault junior drivers into play. So the days of Kimi Raikkonen being in Formula One, I think, are finally going to end, and races like today kind of suit that sort of thing, whether it has to do with him or the fact that they don't have a great car. I mean, they haven't had a great car for a long time, so it is what it is for old Keemster. Hopefully he had a nice drink after the race and is enjoying his post-race party.
Yeah, it's kind of I'm just having a look, but it's kind of it looks like it's getting to the twilight years. Yeah, it's the twilight years of Kimi's career, but we've said that before, and he's gone away and come back. 20-year career ain't bad, but knowing Kimi, we'll probably see him in the next 2 or 3 years still scoring points every so often. After that, we've got Nicholas Latifi, Tom, who just doesn't seem to have the X factor of George Russell, and it's unfortunate, but we kind of keep saying his name in this position.
Yeah, we didn't see him at all on the coverage, but I don't really think that's a major loss. To have actually lost places during the race in a Williams is pretty bad going. He's finished behind Kimi Raikkonen, who started on the hards. Who obviously I've said about that strategy just not working. Yeah, he was ahead of his teammate at one point when Russell fell down through the order, but we didn't see it. It's his first time at this track. That's potentially the only caveat we can say to that. But saying that, he did race here a couple of times in 2018 and 2019 in F2. And in fact, in those championships, he would have had 2 races those weekends as well. So ignore me. He's got no excuse. He knows this place just as well as anyone else. Not seeing him at all in the race. Don't know what happened to him. He had no pace. He was lapped very early on. He's only beaten the Hasses, who were nowhere. I have no idea how close he was to Raikkonen because, as I said, I didn't see him all race anyway. So, I would like to know. I mean, Michael Latifi's got a big stake in that team, and he does own a big part in McLaren as well. I was kind of half expecting Latifi to be pushing his son towards McLaren, but that doesn't appear to be happening, which gives me. Makes me give Michael Latifi a lot more respect than any other billionaire dads in the sport. But he does, as I say, own a huge part in that Williams team. How long can that money stay there, and how long can Latifi stay there based on that? Because Williams need to be pushing forwards. If Doralton Capital want to get a return on their investment, they need 2 drivers that are going to be pushing that team forwards. And George Russell, we all know, is not going to be there. And Nicholas Latifi, he's there. That's the only thing he's got going for him. They need 2 drivers pushing that thing forward. They tried the Robert Kubica route. That didn't work. They need to find another option. And it can't be another Sergei Sorokin or something like that, bring in Russian millions. It's got to be someone that's going to push that team forward. Dare I say, if Red Bull decide not to keep Perez, would Perez be an option for that team? It's probably the most likely place for him for a team moving forwards and trying to progress. But I don't think he would go there based on what he's seen this season. We wanted to see Williams breaking away from Haas and pushing Alfa Romeo, but they're no closer to Alfa Romeo than they were last year. It's just because Haas are so bad, it's making them look like they've made improvements when really they haven't. George is doing a great job in qualifying, not doing masses in the races. Apart from today is a good performance, but they need to push on, and they're just not. And it's a shame for the Williams team. I want to see them back up there. It wasn't that long ago. It was Williams and McLaren back of the grid. Everyone's saying what's happened to these 2 historic teams. Now just look how far ahead McLaren are in the same period of time. It's just it's not good enough. They need to improve, and he needs to improve as well.
Yeah, definitely. It's not. It's one of the sort of big thorns in the side of Williams right now. Is their inability to get Latifi to get both drivers above the Alfa Romeos at times, whereas right now it's just one. After that, we've got you mentioned them earlier, but it's the team that's fallen quite far back. Horrible day for Mick Schumacher. Obviously qualifying 15th, but not start. Oh no, did he start though? You'd think he
Yeah,
did start there.
he started there and he crashed in qualifying.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I'm surprised to have seen him to have seen him start. I thought that'd be a gearbox change for sure. We've got Mick Schumacher. Decent dayish. Didn't really do much, but he got into a bit of a tangle with the other car.
Yeah.
What do we what do we think of that?
Well, it's usual. Egghead has to make himself known once a weekend, whether it's with him spinning, whether it's with him trying to run his teammate off the racetrack, whether it's him being a moron. Well, I mean, he's just a moron by trade anyway. But the fact of the matter that he has no ability to use his mirrors or ability to pass a car without running it off the racetrack, notwithstanding. I mean, he ran Mick off the racetrack, made him go off in one of the stupid hieroglyphic areas, and the S is, I think, the first part of the racetrack there, and then Mick lost a ton of time, and I think he had to pit, and then still came back and passed Egghead and finished 15 seconds ahead of him on the racetrack. So, I mean, or 14 and change seconds, and he was only like 20 seconds behind Nicholas Latifi. So, I mean, Mick has had a kind of a rough spell these last 3 weeks. I think that crash at Monaco affected him in regards to the confidence. I mean, the car's a piece of garbage anyways, but then when you have an accident and when you're already in a bad kind of place and you know that you don't really have any help, knowing that the other side is basically a walking broomstick, and it's like you're just trying to drive it out and try to get through the year and try not to get yourself hurt. I mean, that's literally what it is with like driving that piece of garbage. I mean, but the best thing is there was a Michelin video they did last week at Detroit with Romain Grosjean and Kevin Magnussen, and you could see the smiles on their faces and how happy they are because they're in cars that are competitive and they're running up front. And Romain Grosjean was running up front in an Indy car, and Kevin Magnussen ended up going later that weekend, winning in a sports car. And it's such an amazing thing. Two guys that have talent and have shown at different times in their careers, and then they both got unceremoniously kicked to the curb because of Putin and and Ferrari to a lesser extent. And then now you have the worst car on the grid, and you're just basically there for follies and for when Egghead's going to get thrown off of a Hell in a Cell or whatever method it'll be that he gets done, because frankly he deserves to get beaten into a pulp, and it would be good for the world.
Yeah, that's about it, really. Yeah, it's a sad time for Mick, and who knew that Nikita Mazepin would be totally comfortable with running with getting all up in someone's personal space. That sort of rounds it out, really. If we, just sort of taking stock of everything that we've been through so far, who was you guys' your two's driver of the day? I would say it's probably, and it pains me to say it, but it's Max Verstappen, to be honest, because it's you've still got to actually execute the strategies that you're given by the team, and his ability to sort of do what to Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes what was done to him, just a couple of races ago, and has been done before to them. You've still got to go and win the thing, and Lewis Hamilton was definitely ahead, and was only a sort of a poor lap away a poor outlap away from being the today's race winner. So that's why he's my driver of the day. If we go to you, Tom.
Yeah, I think that's a great shout. I don't think you can look beyond Max Verstappen. I mean, he made things very difficult for himself by going off track and giving Hamilton the lead, which obviously took him quite a long time to recover from. But the fact that he did recover from it, but you could look at Lando Norris as an honourable mention, given the chance that he had. But again, he had got off to a bad start. He lost 2 places at the start. I don't think it affected his race at the end of the day. Daniel Ricciardo, and again another good performance. Can't fault him at all. I think Norris had the slightly favourable strategy, but I think Ricciardo would be the closest alternative to driver of the day that I would say beyond that, unless you looked at someone like Fernando Alonso. but for a good performance there. But yeah, I think overall it probably is Verstappen, but there's definitely some honourable mentions in there, given how well he did, how well they did. And of course, you can't look beyond Hamilton as well, because to finish just 3 seconds behind Verstappen when Verstappen clearly had the best car, good effort, but kind of helped by Verstappen making changing the race circuit a little bit on lap 1. But yeah, no, I'd agree. I would go with Max Verstappen as well.
Right, so yeah, good sort of justification for that. Philip, what's yours?
Yeah, I mean, we could go with old number 33, but I'll go with his teammate, Sergio Perez, in large part because it's something Red Bull has never had, a second driver that is willing to not only work for the better of the team, but also able to do his own thing, have his own autonomy, and be able to do his own thing, which these last couple of races, Sergio Perez has taken that step forward and is really getting comfortable in the organization, in his car. His qualifying, of course, he's never been a great qualifier, but for him to get start fourth, kind of hold, and he fell back, but we now know why. That was in kind of by design. They played that strat very, very well and did a great job past Porridge and took those points away too. So, I mean, I would steal this from Tom's podcast. The dick of the day would go to the Mercedes strategy crew for their amazing consistency the last 3 races and their ability to go and figure out ways to put either give away races or put Lewis in bad spots, and then also not being able to pit Valtteri Bottas's car either, which was also something that's kind of always been a problem, but has kind of gone away when they had a speed advantage. Now that they don't have that now they're getting exposed. So credit to Checo. I also think, as Tom mentioned with Ricciardo, best run I think he's had really all year. And I think that's progress that he's going to take up as he continues through the rest of the year. Had to give up a lot of points early in the season, but I think now that Ricciardo's feeling better about his car, he's going to be able to keep moving forward and make positive influences into the grid as we go along.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's excellent points you make. Right, so to be honest, that just come to the end of the show. So you'll know if you're watching live, but if you're listening after the fact, we're now streaming the show live on YouTube. So to be sure to like our Facebook page and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Formula One Grid Talk. Also ring the bell icon so you're notified of future shows and when we go live. We're now available on Verbal, as well as Amazon Music, YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Music, Omni Studio, and Pocket Casts. Just search F1 Grid Talk. We have a large back catalogue of shows, over 110 episodes now, including interviews with Mario Sola from Pirelli, as well as retrospective pieces on Tiregate, Senna, and the 1994 Benetton conspiracy. Just before I sort of let you know where you can find us later, because we will be back soon. If I just go one by one for you guys, where can we find you for more of your stuff?
Yeah, you can catch me and my co-host Carl when he's not massively busy on the Monkey Seat podcast, which is available on all major podcasting platforms, Spotify and iTunes, all that kind of stuff. It's at Monkey Seat Pod on all of the socials as well. Yeah, we cover all motorsport, including IndyCar, Formula E, Extreme E. We're going to cover W Series as well. Lots and lots of content to talk about. So come along after listening to this one, of course.
And for me, you can follow myself and my co-host Joshua Fine on the Grip Strip Pod at Grip Strip Pod on Twitter. We are on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, TuneIn, Podbean, Pandora, anywhere you can find podcasts. You can find it on philipgmatthew.com, which is my personal blog site, and also one place where you can find the show. We're at 65 episodes and building, just like Tom and Carl with the Monkey Seat Pod. And, we cover all different motorsports here in the States. and whether it's through the regular just recaps and previews, but then we also do the roundup. So please give us a like and a listen as well.
Yeah, do go listen to those two. They are excellent. If you ever sort of come over all weird and you decide, you know what, I'd like to go through a bit of self-flagellation, you can sort of search up my meme articles, which I do for sportlikepro.com. I think they're funny. So after that...
They're very funny, Owen.
It's called leeching off other people's work. You should do it. Right. If you're still stuck to do what to do between shows, check out our subreddit F1 Grid Talk to give us suggestions for what we can do to improve the show, and perhaps subscribe to our Patreon for mics, lights, and better recording equipment for our presenters. We will be back at 8 p.m. tomorrow, UK time, to give our preview for the newly added to the calendar Styrian Grand Prix. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye. Right, there we go. Stop the recording. There we go. Why do they put a pause in there? A pause recording thing. And why does it not say, would you like to pause the recording? Is what I would like to know. That was one misclick away and I've ruined it. We're now sort of in the post-show, so do stick around if you're watching the live stream just to sort of to hear our thoughts and things, because we do answer your questions of things that are in the chat there. We've got a question for you guys actually. I think that's quite interesting. Is now that Vettel is looking a bit more back in form, how do you guys think he'd do in this season in a Red Bull? That's from Connor Walker. So great to have you watching the show, Connor. Thank you for loving it, like you say. Yeah, I don't think he'd do that well, to be honest. I'll throw it to you guys because I'm not sure.
I think it's a hard car to drive, but he knows the group very well. Obviously, coming from with the Red Bull Academy, I'm sure he would get to grips with things. It's difficult to say, really. I think Perez has shown last season how good he can be, and with Charles Leclerc in the same car as Vettel last year, he was. It doesn't matter how much favour that Ferrari were giving Leclerc, if any. To finish that far and be that far off Leclerc, don't care where your head's at, it's not great. So I don't think he would be doing as well as Perez. I think he would certainly be probably further up than he is now in the Aston Martin, obviously, but he wouldn't be getting the most out of that car like Perez is now starting to do. I mean, if we look at the start of the season Vettel had, he was just as kind of out to sea as Ricciardo was at the start of the season. It took him 3 or 4 races to get into it, and then once we get to Monaco, a circuit he knows very well, a circuit that he's won at, he gets a favourable strategy, gets a bit of luck, and boom, he's in 5th position. Next race comes along, Azerbaijan, little bit of out the box thinking, kept his nose clean, boom, 2nd place. So yeah, he's back. He's definitely showing the potential there, but I don't think he would be doing anywhere near as good as Sergio Perez is. I don't think he would be that rear gunner that Max Verstappen needs, or also I don't think he would be willing to be that Max Verstappen that rear gunner that Max Verstappen needs either. Whereas Perez is very much knows what he's in for. I do think Vettel's got the better deal though, because he's got a multi-year deal with a team that's supposedly going places. The threat of the sort of Damocles that hangs above any second Red Bull driver is always going to be a threat. The fact that it's got a multi-year deal means he can really think about if he wants to stay in Formula One beyond the new regulations. And I'm sure come the end of his contract, if he's winning races or being close to winning races at Aston Martin, there will be people that will be very interested in his services come 2023. So he's opened himself up. He's guaranteed his place in F1 for 2 years, and he's got options come the end of that time. So I think he's probably played the right card, because I think Aston Martin are the right team for him at this stage in his career. If he goes to Red Bull, it all goes pear-shaped. He's out of Formula One at the end of this season, and no one wants that. He's a great guy to have around, and we want to see him stay.
Yeah, I don't really know what else to add to that. It was very well said by Tom, and I will say, though, that for Seb, he also has the options, knowing that they want him as kind of like a spokesperson for Aston Martin. They also have, I think, the hypercar deal going on with LMH and all that stuff for sports cars and that whole bit that might be in play. So he has Red Bull may be involved in something in, like in one of those different areas with electric or hybrid or racing, but in terms of where he is in Formula One relative to where he's at, and he kind of is in the right spot. I don't think the Red Bull would be the right spot for him. I don't think he'd be doing any better than what Checo is doing. And especially as what he's done the last couple of years in a Ferrari, he basically looked like he was done. And for early in the season, it kind of fit that bill. But the last two races and then even today kind of was a change back, a harken back to what he was doing and showing some of the skill that made him a 4-time world champion and third winningest driver in history of Formula One. But I think his angle and his future is more as a, like a spokesperson, kind of going and pushing the Aston Martin brand forward. And whether it's in Formula One or sports cars, I think he'll be involved in that for a long time, which is a positive thing. Maybe he'll come to the States and run some sports car races eventually. So that'll be cool to see Seb at Daytona or Sebring one day.
Yeah, definitely. I kind of agree with you guys, to be honest. I don't think it's going to be an amazing thing, particularly where the car is. Vettel likes a car that's stable at the rear, and well, Max doesn't. It's not gone well in the past, and I don't think it would continue to go well. Right, there was an incident between, supposedly an incident between Sergio Perez and Bottas that I can't see. We didn't see it on the coverage, as far as I can tell, and I'm struggling to find anything that says anything about it anywhere else. Do you guys, have you picked that up in anywhere? Because I'm looking on Twitter and it's just.
Yeah, I saw it mentioned in the coverage that it was under investigation, but nothing came of it in the end. I mean, I'm assuming it was just the overtake and the fact that it was a little close on the corner exit, but there was nothing really there for me that warranted any kind of investigation whatsoever. I mean, it was more a bigger thing to investigate would have been Max Verstappen off at turn 2, but he clearly didn't gain an advantage from it. So yeah, no investigation necessary. But yeah, it's an odd one. I didn't see, because I mean at first I thought, well, maybe he's done something and Mercedes have seen that and that's why they're not boxing Bottas, because they think he might be in for a penalty. But clearly that was never going to happen. So no, I have no idea what it was. But yeah, whatever it was, it certainly didn't warrant a penalty anyway.
Yeah, definitely. It can't have been that bad, I don't think.
The penalty. Whatever penalty he was going to have was given to him with the strategy they gave him. So anything else they wanted to do after that would have just been collateral damage for Porridge. And he's just like a beaten man at this point. I think that's literally what it is. It's almost like they need to make a call and just say, hey, go to Williams and Doritos and say, hey, we'll take George Russell right now so then we don't lose the Constructors' Championship. And tell Valtteri, yeah, you're going to go and talk crap about us on the radio. We're just going to send you to go and drive with Latifi down there at Williams. And then call it a day.
He's not going to go to Williams. He'll leave Formula One before he goes back to Williams.
Yeah.
He's said himself he's considered leaving the sport in the last few years. I think I could see him going somewhere like Alpine. But those options are closed off. I could see him going to Red Bull if that was an option. That's closed off. Aston Martin aren't going to want him because they've got Stroll and Vettel. McLaren aren't going to want him. That's it for him. He's unless he wants to just hang around at the back of the grid, which I don't think he does. As soon as his time runs out at Mercedes, he's out of the sport.
Hopefully there's I'm just thinking. Hopefully there's actually like a seat for him in the hypercar stuff actually, because there's a fair few teams looking for fairly quick drivers, and it seems like maybe that would more suit him because typically. I mean,
don't get me wrong. We criticise him, but he is a dynamite qualifier. He's an incredibly fast racing driver, but when it comes to wheel-to-wheel racing, he's not a dogfighter, and that's what you need to be a triple threat when it comes to Formula One. You need to be able to qualify well, you need to be able to race fast, you need to be able to overtake. And I can't think of one overtake where Bottas has made where it's been, it's been a 50-50 overtake and he's made it stick. I'm sure there has been, but I can't think of a time. Even in his time at Williams, when Williams had a decent car in 2014-15, he was there getting the odd podium here and there, but he was being like outraced by Massa there.
Yeah.
He was doing the quicker times, but Massa was the one who was outracing him. So it just goes to show. I mean, Felipe Massa's not your fastest ever racing driver, but he was a decent driver, and he was a better racer than Bottas. So he's doing he has always been doing the job Mercedes have employed him to do. But yeah, I can't see him in Formula One after his Mercedes spell.
No, it's either sports cars or World Rally Championship, because there
You
are
do well.
multiple factory. He'd do just fine in the rallies. It makes sense. Because Raikkonen's probably going to go there and wrap it around a tree a couple times, like he did the last time he was in World Rally Championship.
I've just read a tweet, a stat basically, and this is the 10th race in Formula One history without a single DNF.
Did you watch the show yesterday?
No,
because I said that. They've robbed that from me.
So you've been robbed by Autosport, if that makes it any better. But,
that's all right then.
Wait, how did you predict that? How did you predict that a day in advance?
I predicted that there would be no overtakes, and it would be I predicted there would be no retirements, and it would be the 10th race in history to do that.
I think you thought it was because it would be boring, though.
Yeah, but the fact I knew it was the 10th race as well.
Well, yeah, fair. I'm just looking at the races, actually, though. It's interesting to me, at least, that most of those have come, like, well, 9 of them have come, post 2000. Which I think says more about the reliability of.
Yeah, they've made these cars kind of very bulletproof. In the V10 era, they'd have epic engine meltdowns, and like Kimi, we were talking about Kimi, how he'd figure out ways, and him and McLaren to figure out ways to lose races. Like I remember Germany, what was it, Nürburgring, when his right front tire blew off or whatever because it had degradation going into turn one. Like there's stuff like that doesn't really happen anymore. And then you have.
Sorry, go on, Phil. Yeah.
No, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, you look at a great example was the 1997 Canadian Grand Prix when you had the McLarens running 1 and 2. ITV went to break, you come back, and they've both broken down on the pit straight. You don't get stuff like that happening anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's I think I've mentioned it before, but when people say, bring back the V12s, and you look at the V12 era, and they had an attrition rate of 50%, for at least with Ferraris.
Well, Ferrari also had crappy cars, and they made bad engines back at that time until like 94 and 95 when they made the 412 T1 and T2. That was the only time where those V12 and then in 90. Their issues back in the 80s and the 90s was with the semi-automatic gearbox, and then also making a good car. And then once they had the 412 T1 and T2, I mean, even Schumacher said it wasn't a bad car. Of course, he ended up he built the team around him. I would have loved to see Michael Schumacher drive a V12 Ferrari outside of just a couple of tests. But Lamborghini gets blamed for that because those things were just literally grenades that were put in the back of a car. Outside of when McLaren tried it that one time when they were debating possibly with going with Lamborghini and making the deal with Chrysler Corporation to go and badge it as a Chrysler and get the whatever. That was, I think, around when they were trying to get they had Michael Andretti around too or something like that. But Senna liked the engine. Senna wanted the extra power instead of that B-spec Ford engine that they ended up having. And I'm like, at the end of the day, he still would have lost the world championship, but at least when he'd fall out of races, he'd have had like epic blow-ups or something. At least it would have been cool. It would have sounded better. It would have looked better. Those videos would have been cooler. And then when he fell out of races, it would have been epic too. So instead, he just drove around in that B-spec Ford and somehow or another still won 5 races in that. And that tells you.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Actually, it's like I'm thinking about it again. Like another 6 of. Actually, I've noticed 2005 US GP. It's like, it's got.
Only had 6 entrants.
He only had 6 entrants in that race. So
I think that makes up for. It's just like no DNS, but 14 did not start.
Yeah.
I think one of the most useless stats I've ever come up with was who was the first ever driver to finish in 24th position, and it was Narain Karthikeyan in Valencia 2011.
Oh,
first driver to ever finish 24th.
That's ignominy there, isn't it?
Well, at least Egghead is around to go and take the heat off of Karthikeyan, if it's possible, since as a brown guy, I kind of feel bad for him. And I mean, not as much for Chandok because he actually has a job on TV and he does test and do other things. But
So Chandok does endurance racing semi-regularly as well.
semi, right? Yeah, but it's whatever. He used that. That's the thing. Had real hopes, and Daruvala's not doing anything this year either. So it's like, okay, we're never gonna have a good driver, are we?
Hamilton's not enough then, no?
Yeah. What is? We might have, hey, Hamilton's enough, but I have to start looking at what's going to be next.
Yeah, absolutely.
I sure as hell am not going to root for the 33 car. He's like the Kyle Busch of Formula One. So he's a D-bag. His dad's a D-bag, just like Kyle Busch's dad. And the team is around him, and they're douchebags too. I mean, it's just the worst, but, you know, it is what it is. I'm just looking for next steps. And it's definitely not going to be Yuki Tsunoda because he's either going to end up being like Takuma Sato wrecking every other week, or he's not going to do it in that car either. So that's what Daruvala would be doing anyways. He'd be in that car, be even further off the pace.
I was going to say I wait Yuki Tsunoda's Indy 500 win then.
Oh yeah, you know, give it about 15, 20 years and he'll show up to Indy. And he'll win the Indy 500 too. It'll be great.
Well, what's he?
Sato.
He's 24 years Sato's junior, I think, isn't he? So you've got to wait a long time then.
Yeah, it's going to be a while because this version of Sato, it took I don't know how many years in IndyCar before he finally put it all together, and then all of a sudden became this Indy 500 expert of sorts.
Yeah. 4 out of the last 5 years, you have the chance of winning it, isn't he?
Yeah.
Maybe he's getting his career second wind.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, he's had it since ever since he went to Rahal again. He's found like a new kind of level that I think everybody thought he would have had or wished he had in Formula One, for especially Honda. But they were showing the video of him finishing third because it was this weekend in 2004 or whatever when he finished third at the U.S. Grand Prix or something for BAR. So, I mean, he did have his moments, and he was entertaining, and he still is at 40-plus years old.
It's weird to me how people can still be competitive in IndyCar at that age. It's just like, you know, I suppose Heli Castroneves is getting on that
46.
46, Helio, yeah.
Yeah,
and then Scott Dixon's in his 40s, yeah.
I mean,
Nigel was in his 40s when he came to IndyCar, and he ran.
I think he was 39, 38 maybe, because I think he was in Indy 93 and he won a race in 95, age 40. So I think he was just late 30s then.
Was he? Well,
I think so, yeah. I could be wrong on that, but I think that's the case.
Because he won all his races in IndyCar in 93. I don't think he won anything in 94 because Penske dominated. Yeah. And then he came back to Formula One in 94, won, I think, the Australian Grand Prix.
Yeah, sorry, it was 94. It's the last race of 94, not 95, yeah. No, 95 is in McLaren. He didn't win.
He couldn't even fit in the car.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't just his head. It was just literally his body couldn't fit in the car. And then, of course, that was that ugly car with that T-wing on it and whatever, too. It was a piece of garbage. That was a car where Mika Hakkinen almost ate it at Adelaide, too, I think. It was 90. Yeah. Was it 90? No, it was 95 when he crashed at that spot, I think. He almost, or it might have been 94. I don't even remember. One of those years. Because I remember, it was... Because what was it? What's his name? The kid. I'm trying to remember the V8 supercars driver. Not the Stone Brothers, the other team. Brad Jones. Yeah, Brad Jones's kid went off in that same area, but it was a big crash, but it wasn't as big of a crash as, of course, like Hakkinen had, and it was like he knocked the whole back end of the car off because of how big of a wreck he had. I mean, Macaulay Jones, there you go. Yeah, the memory's working. So.
Right. No more questions, so I think I kind of need to. I've got stuff to do, so I'm gonna have to wrap it up.
No problem.
Good to see you guys. Good to have you on.
Yeah,
good fun.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, no